All right, let's dive into Interesting Times. It's one of Terry Pratchett's most chaotic Discworld novels. And today we are going to explore Rincewind, the Disc's most notoriously cowardly wizard, and how he ends up smack dab in the middle of a revolution in the Agatean Empire.
The Agatean Empire itself, it really is quite a fascinating creation, this vast, walled-off empire. It's steeped in tradition and bureaucracy and almost fanatical devotion to order and
It's
rules.
almost like someone took Ankh-Morpork, turned the order and chaos dials up to 11, and then surrounded it with a giant wall. But even in the most ordered societies, chaos has a way of sneaking in. And in this case, it comes in the form of Rincewind and a hefty dose of cultural misunderstanding.
Yeah, the catalyst for this chaos is actually a book written by Two Flower, you remember him, a tourist from Ankh-Morpork. His well-meaning but somewhat naive travel writings have inadvertently become the inspiration for a brewing revolution within the Agatean Empire.
So Two Flower documented Rincewind's various misadventures back in Ankh-Morpork. But the Agateans, with their very literal interpretations of everything, have taken these accounts as gospel. They believe Rincewind to be this incredibly powerful wizard, a figure they refer to as the Great Wizard.
A classic Pratchett setup, right? Taking these everyday occurrences, filtering them through the lens of a completely different culture, and then watching the sparks fly. For example, Two Flower mentions a man treading on a city guard's toes in Ankh-Morpork.
Which, let's be honest, probably not going to end well in most cases.
Exactly. But in Two Flowers' telling, the Agateans interpret this as a subtle display of power, a coded insult that forces the guard to back down in fear. They completely miss the chaotic, anything-goes nature of Ankh-Morpork street life.
And then there's the infamous urinating dog pictogram that Two Flower uses throughout his book.
Ah, yes, the symbol that's meant to be a simple exclamation point, but ends up taking on a whole new meaning in the Agatean context, this kind of cultural disconnect. It's pure comedic gold, and it sets the stage for some truly hilarious and thought-provoking situations.
It's amazing how Pratchett can take something as seemingly harmless as a tourist's travelogue and turn it into a catalyst for revolution.
Yeah.
So we have this brewing revolution, inspired by a completely inaccurate portrayal of Rincewind. And then we throw Rincewind himself into the mix. How does he even end up in the Agatean Empire in the first place?
Well, it wouldn't be a Rincewind story. Without a healthy dose of magical mishap, the wizards at Unseen University, in their infinite wisdom, decide to use their magical computer, Hex, to try and resolve some magical instability. And who do they choose as their test subject?
Let me guess. The wizard, who's practically synonymous with bad luck and a knack for attracting trouble.
The one and only. They basically fire Rincewind off into the magical ether, with no real idea where he'll end up. And as luck would have it, or perhaps as Rincewind's lack of luck would have it, he lands right in the middle of the Agatean Empire.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But it's not just Rincewind, who finds himself caught up in the Agatean Empire's turmoil. We also have Cohen the Barbarian and his aging band of warriors, the Silver Horde. Now they have a much more straightforward goal: conquer the empire and claim its riches.
Cohen's a fascinating character in his own right, this grizzled, battle-hardened barbarian who, despite his advanced age, still clings to the thrill of adventure and conquest. And his Silver Horde, their motley crew of equally aged but surprisingly capable warriors.
What's interesting about Cohen and his horde is that they represent a very different kind of chaos compared to Rincewind. Rincewind's chaos is largely accidental, driven by his desire to avoid trouble, which ironically leads him straight into it. Cohen, on the other hand, embraces chaos. He's a force of nature, and his actions have a deliberate, almost primal energy to them.
So we have these two very different forces of chaos converging on the Agatean Empire, one driven by accident, the other by ambition.
And caught in the middle of it all is the Agatean Empire itself, this seemingly unyielding bastion of order and tradition. It's a recipe for disaster, or perhaps a recipe for one of the most entertaining and insightful Discworld novels ever written.
Now, before we dive into the events that unfold, let's talk a bit more about Rincewind himself. He's known as the Disc's most cowardly wizard. But is there more to him than just a fear of everything?
Rincewind's cowardice is legendary, and it plays a huge role in driving the plot of Interesting Times. But I think it's important to remember that even in his cowardice, there's a certain kind of resilience. He's constantly running away from danger, yet he always seems to survive. He's like a cockroach, able to withstand anything the universe throws at him.
That's a great point. It makes you wonder if his cowardice is actually a survival mechanism, a way of navigating a world that's constantly trying to kill him.
It's certainly possible, and it adds a layer of complexity to his character that goes beyond the simple label of coward. He's not necessarily a hero in the traditional sense, but his actions, or rather his reactions, have a way of shaping events in unexpected ways.
And speaking of unexpected ways, let's not forget about the luggage, this magical chest. That follows Rincewind everywhere. It's a character in its own right, fiercely loyal, incredibly dangerous, and has a fondness for biting anyone who gets too close to its owner.
The luggage is a perfect example of Pratchett's whimsical world building. It's this absurd, almost cartoonish creation, yet it also serves a deeper purpose. It represents Rincewind's connection to the magical forces of the Discworld, and it often acts as a sort of equalizer, protecting him from threats that he wouldn't be able to handle on his own.
And it makes for some truly hilarious scenes, especially when it's rampaging through the streets of a foreign city, leaving a trail of bewildered and slightly bruised individuals in its wake.
Chaos personified, but with a certain charm. It adds a layer of unpredictability to Rincewind's already chaotic life.
So we have Rincewind, the reluctant hero, armed with his cowardice and his luggage,
Yeah.
about to face a revolution he inadvertently inspired.
And let's not forget Cohen the Barbarian, marching towards the Forbidden City with conquest on his mind. And somewhere in between those two forces of chaos, the Agatean Empire is about to experience a period of truly interesting times.
That's a great setup for part 2 of our deep dive. We'll explore how these different forces collide, how Rincewind's accidental heroism plays out, and whether Cohen can actually conquer an empire that's already on the brink of imploding from within. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into interesting times. We left off with Rincewind, the disc's most reluctant hero, arriving in the Agatean Empire. Just as a revolution he unintentionally inspired is about to boil over. And let's not forget Cohen the Barbarian. He's heading straight for the heart of the empire, with his own plans for conquest.
It's really fascinating to see how these two characters, both representing chaos in their own way, interact with the Agatean Empire's rigid order, Rincewind through a series of misunderstandings, and his signature brand of panicked improvisation becomes the figurehead of the Red Army.
It's like the universe has a twisted sense of humor, placing the wizard who wants nothing more than a quiet life, right at the center of a rebellion. What really strikes me is how Rincewind's cowardice is constantly misinterpreted as tactical brilliance.
Oh, absolutely. The Red Army. Fueled by their warped understanding of Two Flowers' accounts, they see Rincewind's every desperate attempt to flee as a calculated maneuver. For them, his fear isn't a weakness, but a sign of his otherworldly power.
There's that hilarious scene where Rincewind escapes from the barking dog. That particularly gruesome Agatean execution device. The Red Army, instead of seeing it as a lucky break, they interpret it as a feat of magic, further solidifying Rincewind's status as the Great Wizard.
And then there's the battle cry they adopt, which is inspired by Two Flowers' overly formal writing style. Necessarily extended duration to the Red Army. Regrettable to cease without undue suffering to the forces of oppression. It's both absurd and brilliant. It perfectly captures the clash between cultures and the way perception shapes reality.
Imagine trying to shout that in the heat of battle.
Yeah.
But while Rincewind is accidentally leading a revolution, Cohen and his Silver Horde, they're cutting a very different path through the Agatean Empire.
The Horde, with their straightforward, brutal approach, they're like a bull in a china shop. When it comes to Agatean customs and bureaucracy, they don't bother with subtlety or etiquette. When faced with the heavily guarded city gates, Cohen simply kills the captain and walks right in.
Such a stark contrast to Rincewind's constant attempts to avoid confrontation. Yet both approaches seem to work in their own chaotic ways. It makes you wonder about the nature of power and whether brute force can be just as effective.
With running away. What's particularly interesting is how the Horde's barbarism clashes with the Agatean Empire's cruelty. While they may be warriors who revel in battle, the Silver Horde is appalled by the Empire's elaborate methods of torture and execution.
There's a certain code of honor. Even in their violence, they see the Agateans' focus on slow, agonizing deaths as cowardly and dishonorable.
Yeah, it really forces us to question our assumptions about civilization and barbarism. Are the Agateans, with their intricate systems of rules and punishments, truly more civilized than a band of warriors who value a quick and honorable death?
It's a thought-provoking question.
Or
And it really highlights how Pratchett often uses satire to challenge our preconceived notions about good and evil, right and wrong. But let's not forget that while Rincewind and Cohen are wreaking havoc in their own ways, there's a deeper power struggle happening within the walls of the Forbidden City.
yeah, the Agatean nobility, always eager to seize more power, see the brewing revolution as an opportunity. Lord Hong, a master manipulator, is particularly adept at exploiting the situation. His goal is nothing less then to usurp the emperor and take control of the empire.
Classic tale of ambition and betrayal. But what's interesting is that the emperor himself is no innocent bystander. He's depicted as a cruel and capricious ruler who seems to enjoy inflicting pain on others. Remember that scene where he's playing chess with live pieces?
Chilling reminder of the corrupting nature of power. And it raises questions about the cyclical nature of such systems. Even if Lord Han succeeds in overthrowing the emperor, will he be any different, or will he simply become another tyrant in a long line of tyrants?
Makes you wonder if true change is even possible within a system that seems designed to perpetuate those in power, regardless of their morality or competence. But as these schemes unfold within the Forbidden City, the forces of chaos are closing in. The Red Army, emboldened by Rincewind's accidental heroism, is preparing to storm the palace.
And Cohen the Barbarian, guided by a captured tax collector, who's less than thrilled about his current predicament, is also making his way towards the emperor's seat of power.
So we have these two very different groups, each with their own motivations and agendas, converging on the same point. It's a recipe for a truly explosive confrontation. What happens next?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive into interesting times. Last we left off, the Agatean Empire was teetering on the edge of complete and utter chaos. The Red Army, inspired by Rincewind's accidental heroism, was about to storm the Forbidden City, while Cohen the Barbarian and his Silver Horde were closing in with conquest on their minds.
Yeah, it's almost as if the empire, with all its rigidity and order, was destined to implode under the weight of these converging forces of chaos.
And it all comes to a head in a spectacularly chaotic climax. The Red Army, led by Rincewind, who's desperately trying to avoid being seen as a leader, breaks into the Forbidden City. Meanwhile, Cohen and his horde, after mistaking the Emperor's throne room for a laundry room,
A classic Pratchett moment, right? Highlighting the absurdity of the situation.
end up face-to-face with the Emperor himself.
It's a scene filled with so much tension and humor. You have these aging barbarians, more concerned with finding a decent place to wash their clothes, suddenly thrust into the center of the empire's power structure. And then, of course, there's Lord Han, who chooses this precise moment to make his move.
His plan, as we discussed earlier, is to assassinate the Emperor, blame it on the Red Army, and seize control. But things don't quite go according to plan, do they?
Not at all. And a wonderfully ironic twist. It's Cohen who ends up killing Lord Han. Not out of any desire for power, but simply because Hong was in his way. It's a moment that speaks volumes about Cohen's character. He's not driven by ambition or political maneuvering. He's a man of action, and he reacts to situations in the most straightforward way possible.
And that straightforwardness, coupled with a healthy dose of chaos and misunderstanding, leads to him being declared the new emperor of the Agatean Empire. It's a perfect example of how Pratchett subverts expectations and uses humor to explore the complexities of power and destiny.
The Agateans, expecting a powerful wizard to lead them, end up with a barbarian who's more interested in a hot bath and a decent meal. It's both hilarious and thought-provoking.
And what about Rincewind? How does he react to all of this?
Well, Rincewind, true to form, escapes the chaos as soon as he gets the chance. He realizes that he's become a symbol, a figurehead for a revolution he never wanted to lead, and he's horrified by the violence and destruction he's witnessed.
So he runs away. Again.
Exactly. But in running away, he inadvertently sets in motion a series of events that will have a lasting impact on the Agatean Empire.
So while Cohen, the accidental emperor, is left to deal with the aftermath of the revolution, Rincewind is off on another adventure, probably wishing he could just find a nice, quiet place to hide.
It's a fitting end for a character who embodies chaos and unintended consequences. And it leaves us with some fascinating questions to ponder.
Can Cohen, a barbarian at heart, rule an empire built on tradition and bureaucracy? Will he bring change to the Agatean Empire? Or will he simply become another cog in the machine?
And what about Rincewind? Will he ever escape his destiny as a catalyst for chaos? Or is he doomed to forever stumble into situations that reshape the very fabric of the Discworld?
Interesting Times doesn't provide easy answers to these questions. Instead, it leaves us with a sense of wonder, a realization that even the most chaotic situations can lead to unexpected and often hilarious outcomes.
It's a reminder that the world is a complex and unpredictable place, and that sometimes the best we can do is hold on tight and enjoy the ride.
And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into Interesting Times. We hope you enjoyed this journey through one of Terry Pratchett's most chaotic and insightful Discworld novels.
Remember, the world is full of interesting times. Embrace the chaos. Question your assumptions. And never underestimate the power of a well-placed banana peel.